queen of the paranormal, creator of Squirrel Girl, animated singers and superheroes, 2 Dogman stories, and more. Scary Good. Welcome to the Scary Good Show on the Scary Good channel. We've got a whole lot of stuff to get to in this hour-long episode, including the queen of the paranormal taking us back to Wolf Swamp. Kadrolsha Ono goes in the field and investigates our story of the wolf people of Massachusetts. That starts at the time you see on screen right now. Another very exciting thing to look forward to, also shot at the Northeast Comic Con this past weekend, is our very informative and revealing interview with the creator of Marvel Comics' Squirrel Girl. He tells us all about how he fought for years to get his lighthearted character taken more seriously. Plus, an all-new music video by Those American Girls, which you will love if you don't like Facebook. Heroical Man, our mascot superhero here at Heroical Mastering Studios, is going to drop by later and introduce us to the newest member of the Heroical Heroes superhero team, and his name is Invincible Man. We've also got 2 Dogman stories, including our first trip to the old dude's library, where he will tell us a Dogman story from one of his secret journals, if he can read his own handwriting. What else? All right, no new Brian the Lycan story today. I promise Brian will return next time, and it's a very good chapter. To kick things off, Henry Lee Dogman has a Wednesday werewolf story for all of you located inside a Wednesday. Take it away, Henry. Wednesday werewolf. When I was a kid, I used to see a werewolf out of my bedroom window at night sometimes. It was only in the summer, and only when I was staying at my grandpa's house, which was the house my mom grew up in. The northern-facing windows in my bedroom there overlooked a dirt path leading to an old covered bridge. The bridge ran over a narrow but very fast-running river that I was warned never to play around. I was told the water could pull a fully grown man away with it, so I was told to respect its power and to never go there except with my grandfather. The scene outside my bedroom window with the river and the covered bridge and the dirt road was extremely old-fashioned, and I always felt like I was looking out onto some past time. It was a lot of fun to stay there around Christmas time, especially if it had snowed. One of the neighbors would drive a big sleigh down the dirt path, jangling the jingle bells to let us all know he was coming, with food and drink and presents for everyone. It was a nice, quiet neighborhood in the country that the interstate had bypassed, so it stayed quiet no matter what happened everywhere else. My parents lived in the suburbs near the city, which had sort of the worst aspects of each, but visiting Grandpa meant being in a peaceful, serene, almost magical location. Except on Wednesday nights, that is. On Wednesday nights, I would sometimes see a werewolf out of my window. Sometimes it would happen early in the evening, around dusk, as the sun was setting. Other times it would happen at 3 a.m. when I got up to get a drink of water. I didn't see him every week, but when I did see him, it was a Wednesday. Now let me tell you what I saw. It was a wolf more than a dog, and it was a large one. I got the impression it was gray, but other times I felt as though it were brown. It would only ever show up in dark areas and at night, so I could never be 100% sure. It looked like a wide-shouldered man, but with tall ears. The first time it caught my eye, I at first thought I was seeing someone in a Batman costume running around through the woods. That was a little frightening, so I waited to see if I could see it again. When I did, I saw it emerging from the other side of the covered wooden bridge, heading away from us, and quickly disappearing off the path into the woods. It was not wearing a cape. In fact, it wasn't wearing anything at all. thought it was a guy in a gorilla costume or a Bigfoot costume, but its head was much more like that of a wolf. I wondered why someone would wear a costume like that, but I didn't mention it to my grandfather. The next time I saw it was 1 week later when I was taking out the trash. I saw it walk right down the center of the dirt path. It acted as though it were in a hurry and kept looking behind it, as though it were trying to escape someone or something that was chasing it. This time it definitely looked gray, and it moved so fast that I was thinking I could almost see through it. That was the last time I ever waited till after dark to take out the garbage at my grandpa's house. That was also the last time I was outside for any reason at all out there on a Wednesday night. Although, to be honest, I didn't actually put the Wednesday night part of the puzzle together until the following week, when I again saw the creature outside one of the windows in the house. This time, it was just before we were going to eat dinner, and I was out in the TV area cleaning up some video games I had left lying around. The creature was sitting on top of the wooden bridge, on the roof of it. It was facing away from me, so I don't know if it was doing anything else other than sitting, but there it was. My heart raced as I wanted to call my grandfather over, but I was really scared of the idea of telling him about it. On the one hand, he might punish me for lying or making up stories if it was gone by the time he looked, and on the other hand, if he saw it and it got him scared, then I would be a lot more frightened than I already was. I don't know if that makes sense. It's sort of the magical way a kid thinks. If I never get an adult to tell me this is real, I can keep acting like it doesn't matter that there's a large, mythical, man-eating beast sitting around outside the house every week. Every week. It did seem like every week. That's when I checked the calendar and realized it had always been Wednesday when I'd see the werewolf. I thought they were cyclical around the full moon, not around the weekly calendar. But maybe werewolves updated themselves to fit into the modern world. What did I know? All I knew was that I had seen the creature 3 times, and it had always been a Wednesday. So the next Wednesday, I was on the lookout for the thing all day, starting well before sundown. I tried not to let my uncle notice what I was doing. After dinner, when I hadn't seen him, I asked if I could go to my room and play video games. I really went up there and stared out my window, waiting for the werewolf to come. At one point, I almost freaked out because I thought I saw a Sasquatch, but it was just the son of one of the neighbors wearing a brown hoodie. He was home from the Marines. I think that's what the story was. So I watched out my window, but I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. My grandfather came upstairs to put me to bed, and after he left, I went right back to that window. When I woke up in the morning, I was draped on the window, drooling on myself. When I straightened out, I realized I'd given myself a neck pain from sleeping in a stupid position. This werewolf had literally become a pain in my neck. I didn't see the creature the week after, and that meant I had 2 Wednesdays left before returning to my parents in the boring suburbs with no werewolves at all and school every day. I started trying to stay up later each night and see how late Grandpa would let me sleep each morning. I wanted to become completely nocturnal, reasoning that it would give me a better chance to see the monster. Grandpa was not interested in letting me sleep past 9 a.m. though, so my plan lasted exactly 1 day. Nevertheless, I snuck off to take naps on Wednesday this next week, hoping it would give me extra stamina to stay up later and see the monster. I also snuck a bag of brown sugar from the pantry. It was the only sugary thing he had in there, and I figured it would help keep me awake. I would hold the bag up in the air and pour it into my mouth, then let it dissolve. Brown sugar. So I stayed up till dawn that time, and I finished half the sugar, but I didn't see anything strange, and I was a mess the next day. Grandpa wanted to bring me to the town doctor, but I just said if I could sleep, it would be a one-day flu. My last Wednesday out there, I was kind of sad and decided not to even try to see the creature. So, of course, that's when I got the most close-up sighting of all. The way it went down was this. I woke up at 2:30 or 3 or sometime like that in the middle of the night, and I went downstairs to get something to eat. I had never done that before. I had never gone downstairs for food in the middle of the night at my grandfather's place. I don't remember what I got out of the refrigerator, but I pulled something out, and I remember eating it and walking over to one of the large windows. Then I pulled the shades to look out, and as I did, I revealed an immense, as in 7 foot tall or taller, hairy, dog-headed man standing directly outside the window, staring back into the room. I panicked and ducked down behind the couch, then peeked out. It was still standing there, still staring directly forward. It hadn't seemed to have noticed me at all, and as I watched it standing there, I realized I could see through it. I could see a light shining right through its shoulder. This was an incredibly tall entity or creature, and I wondered if it might be a different one than the ones I had seen before. This one was gray and white, and its eyes shone a bright yellowy orange. I could see it had some pretty ferocious looking fangs, although it was not growling or looking angry at the moment I was observing it. The creature had spots of fur missing on its belly, as though it had been suffering a rash or maybe a vermin infestation. It looked very much like a real creature. The expressions on its face, while unreadable, were unique and not those that would be made with a mask or by an unthinking beast. Whatever this was, it both seemed biologically alive, and yet I could also see right through it. It's hard to even describe, and there's nothing I can compare it to that I can think of. Nothing at all. I ran up to my bedroom to get a greater distance between me and the monster. Then I looked out of my window down at where it was. Nothing was there anymore. So it had saved the best appearance of all for my last Wednesday that year. The creature didn't put in any appearances at all the next summer or the one following. I had gotten a theory that it was only migrating through the area that one summer, and it was probably roaming an entirely different place by now. But then I got a huge surprise a few years after, when I was a teenager. I don't remember if I was 15, 16, 17. It was in that range. I had pretty much chalked up my childhood Dogman sightings to imagination and vivid dreams. Then, one night, all that changed, and I finally had to confront my grandfather about the entire subject. It was a Wednesday night, of course. I was watching something on TV in the living room, and my grandfather was in his room reading a book. There was suddenly a lot of shouting outside, so I got up to look at what was going on. I saw nothing out of the ordinary, but I could hear the sounds of angry people shouting things. Then I saw it. The Dogman, or werewolf. It looked exactly as I had seen it when I was a kid, taking the garbage out that night. It ran down the road, toward the house, toward the covered wooden bridge. It looked over its shoulder, but I saw nothing behind it. The creature ran right past our house, down the road, and ran into the covered bridge. Then, the sounds of shouting dissipated and disappeared, and I could see the wolf creature emerging from the far end of the bridge and running off into the woods on the other side. I ran and got my grandfather and told him what I saw. I was no longer afraid of the repercussions, and this time I was certain about what I had seen and heard. Grandpa looked amazed, but told me he wasn't surprised to hear this. He told me he had seen it too. I poured out all the stories I've just told you, informing him about every time I had witnessed the creature, including sometimes being able to see through it. He just nodded his head as though that weren't such a strange thing. Then he told me to sit down so he could tell me a story from his childhood. Grandpa, like my mother, had been born in that very house. When he was 5 years old, there was a big hubbub outside the house as the parents in the neighborhood, including his own father, had cornered and chased an actual werewolf down that very street. He said he had watched the entire scene from his bedroom window. That's the same room which I now sleep in. We saw the monster from the same window. Grandpa described what I had already seen play out more than once. The monster ran on its hind legs like a man, but it had a wolf's head and wore no clothes. It ran in a nervous manner, looking over its shoulder repeatedly. Only in Grandpa's version, there really were people chasing the creature, and they had weapons and torches. The creature climbed on top of the bridge and roared back down at the crowd. They threw things at it, according to Grandpa, who could watch the entire scene from his window. The creature caught some of the things, like he caught a rock. Then he threw it right back at the person who had thrown it at him. An animal couldn't do that. The thing clearly had intelligence. But what it didn't have was luck, as it slipped off of the roof and plunged into the fast-moving river, being washed away too quickly for the body to be recovered. Grandpa said they never found the remains, and they never discovered who the werewolf was for sure. But the town judge disappeared the same night as the Wolfman, and his widow moved away from town due to all the nasty gossip about her missing husband. My grandfather had seen the ghost of the werewolf many times since then. It would always appear on a Wednesday, which was the day when it died. It would play out like a movie, but in 3D. The creature never seemed to see him, as though it were a residual haunting. But unlike a residual haunting, the creature would behave a little bit differently each time it appeared. I told him about the time the creature seemed to be looking into the house, but didn't react to anything happening inside there. Grandpa had never seen the creature come that close, but it supported his argument that the scenario was ever changing. It was as though the situation would replay itself, but the poor creature would have to relive it each time as though it were a new thing. It would have to try to find a way to survive, Maybe when I saw it running through the bridge and into the woods, maybe those were the times when the scenario played out and the creature escaped the townspeople. Maybe this was all some kind of a limbo where the Dogman's death is replayed over and over again. If life can be compared to a video game, as some scientists think it can be, then maybe someone just really likes that part of this video game we call Planet Earth. Maybe they're just simulating that one scene over and over again. As he was telling me all these stories, we began to hear a low, moaning howl off in the woods. It was a solitary howl, and no other creatures joined in with it. If that was a dog or a wolf, it was a dog or a wolf with a great deal of lung capacity. The howling went on for so long, I couldn't even hold my breath as long as one of those screams. It was terrifying. I suggested we leave. Grandpa laughed and reminded me that we'd be safer inside than out in the dark, even if we were driving. Besides, he told me, those might only be the howls of a ghost. I agreed that it might be, but what if it was a real creature, a descendant of the one who fell off the bridge, or maybe a cousin or something? If they lived in this area in the 1940s, that's not so long ago that they might not still be living in the area up until the 21st century. Maybe some of the creatures I saw weren't ghosts. Sometimes they seemed more brown than gray after all. Maybe both kinds of dogmen were haunting the area, living ones and dead ones. My grandfather and I, over the years, discussed setting up trap cameras to try to get pictures or video of the thing. We set up 3 still cameras, and now we have a motion-activated video camera as well. Of course, the werewolf has never appeared again since any of this equipment was set up. Maybe the glitch in the game got corrected, or maybe whoever was replaying that scenario got bored and moved on to the Death of Bigfoot scene from whichever Grand Theft Auto version that was. In any case, Grandpa and I keep the cameras set up and check them periodically. It's something to talk about, and you never know when they might actually get a photo or a video of something that might change the entire worldview of a whole bunch of people. The reason we didn't have an episode for a few days is that all of us monsters got packed up in Peter's head and taken up to the Northeast Comic-Con for the St. Patrick's Day weekend. Here are some images from the event. It was a lot of fun. The Fools played. That's a classic Massachusetts band dating back to the 80s or even earlier. Lots of great cosplay, as you can see. And I got to go back and take some more pics of creepy Wolf Swamp. When I first got there, the queen of the paranormal pulled me aside and told me she herself had gone to Wolf Swamp after hearing our last episode about it. So I went and got my phone to record her telling the story. Now I'm going to share it with all of you. So you guys are lucky you get to hang with Kadrolsha Ona without even making the trip up to Massachusetts. Let's check that out right now. Here we are with the queen of the paranormal, Kadrolsha Ona. Now, Kadrolsha has a story that actually relates to a Wolf Swamp story that happened, that we talked about on this channel earlier. But first I wanted to ask you, what you actually do? You do paranormal kind of stuff, like supernatural kind of psychic stuff. So what actually were you doing so that people will understand that, and then we could get into what happened? Okay, what I was actually doing was trying to see if there's any validity to the story that I heard on the internet by Peter Bernard. It's Dogman, and I think, I don't know which number it was, but it was a fascinating story, and I was riveted in it, and I'm thinking, like, you know, it's not that far away. Maybe I will go down there and check it out, bring some ghost hunting equipment, and let's see if we can get some things to move, or do an EVP, like that electronic voice phenomena. Basically, you're talking to the dead on a tape recorder, hoping you get a response, and that's what I was trying to do. So you were trying to reach the native people who used to live here, or the Dogman, or like?
Actually, anything. If I could pick it up, because you never know what may come through on an EVP and what may not. And what I dealt with was what may not. And it really surprised me, because that's a rare phenomenon to happen. You usually hear something with your ears, and you got the recorder going, and then you play it back, and it's like, why is it not on the recorder?
So what actually happened? We haven't told them.
So what had happened was I'm listening to the Dogman story about the wolf swamp and the wolf people. The Nipmuc tribe used to live here, and they had, a good spirit thing, and then a bad spirit thing, and you got to get into YouTube to watch that, and I'm sure we'll put up the graphics for that. You got to listen to the story first. But so I bring my ghost hunting equipment. I have a little recorder, and I went out into the swamp area there, and I started to ask questions. Are there any spirits here? I'm calling for people that may have lived here. Can you see me? And then I'm hearing these almost like howling noises, and I want to say they sound like wolves, but then, my mind goes back to history where there used to be wolves here. That's why they were called wolf people and wolf swamp. So, of course, your mind goes back to, I think I'm hearing a wolf, like that, or maybe a coyote. And I played the EVP back, and there was no howling on it. So I'm doing another one. I'm hearing the howling again, and I played it back, nothing at all, no voices from the dead, and no howling. And so I said, all right, so I was going to walk to another area, and I started getting like maybe a blurred vision and kind of dizzy. And I said, geez, I feel, a little off there. And right after that happened, I almost like a tinny taste of blood in my mouth. And that has happened before, and when that happens on a paranormal investigation, at least for me, it means get out of there. And I don't question it, and I immediately left, not to return, because I had a feeling that maybe those could have been signals that there is something there, and to maybe leave it alone. So I left it alone and left, but I'm glad I had this opportunity to share my story with you about the swamp people, wolf swamp and wolf people.
Cool. That's pretty amazing. What do people usually contact you about when they need help about things?
You name it. Anything paranormal. Anything from UFOs to cryptozoologies, curses, folklore, ghost hunting.
People contact you about
EVPs,
monsters, really?
Everything. Excuse me?
About cryptozoology? They contact you about monsters and things?
Yes, everything. I host a program called Paranormal 13 News, which I created with 2 other people. And we are everywhere. queenoftheparanormal.com, and you can get to all those other links. And we focus on like global paranormal experiences and things. So they contact me with any questions, pictures, experiences, and I'm user friendly. I get back to them and try to explain to them what may be happening and what may be not happening.
So it's not like love spells or anything, it's all like ghosts and that sort of stuff?
When I mean everything, I mean love spells, I mean curses, I mean, you name it.
Well, you don't put curses on people, do you?
Excuse me?
You don't put curses, you lift curses, right?
Wow.
Oh, okay.
Depends how much.
Ladies and gents, this is your host, Heroical Man, and I'd like to introduce the newest of the Heroical Heroes. Here he is, the Invisible Man. No, it's the Invincible Man, not the Invisible Man. I don't get it. I can see you clearly. No, not invisible, invincible. I'm the Invincible Man. Yeah, I heard that already, but I can see you fine. Go ahead, become invisible. You're wasting everyone's time. But I don't become invisible. I'm the Invincible Man. I can't be vinced. I'm invincible. Okay, I'm sorry, folks. I thought this guy was legit, but apparently I was wrong. Get out of here, buddy. Wait, I really am invincible. Just try to defeat me in battle. You'll see that you can. Sure, pal. We believe you're a superhero. Sorry, folks. We'll be back next time with someone who has actual superpowers, I promise. No, really, test me out. Seriously.
I deleted Failbook from me phone. I deleted Failbook. Leave me alone. I deleted Failbook. Too intrusive. Complete delete now. All inclusive. Failbook are such party poopers. Demanding ID like stormtroopers. Deleting my friends left and right. They must think we're not too bright. Delete your Failbook from your phone. Throw out the bookmark on your browser. Their spying I just can't condone. No ifs or ands or whys or houses. I deleted Failbook from me phone. I deleted Failbook, leave me alone. I deleted Failbook, too intrusive. Complete delete now, all inclusive.
Haunted House Dogman Habituation, as told to and read by Peter Bernard. This is a story about visiting my uncle's house and property in New Jersey, where I saw what I think might have been a dogman, but not until after I experienced other events which I think were possibly paranormal. I grew up on the West Coast in Northern California, just outside of Redding. We have a bunch of national forests around here, and I heard a few stories while growing up about Bigfoot. I had once visited a friend's house that she said was haunted, but nothing interesting happened while I was there. I had never even heard of the Dogman. Then, last year, my family moved to Long Island, and we've gotten to meet relatives we had only heard of prior. One of them was my Uncle William from New Jersey. He lives a long drive from here. It's either in Fairfield Township, I think, or maybe Lawrence. I know it's surrounded by wildlife management areas and very close to Delaware Bay. My parents always drive when we go there, so I'm not really paying attention to exactly where we are. I was told to be prepared to see kinds of birds I had never seen before, but I wasn't told to be prepared about the ghosts or the Dogman. The first time we went out there, we drove out on Friday night, planning on sleeping over until leaving Sunday afternoon. That first night, I was shown my room, which was made up like a teenage boy's room but smelled musty and old. I didn't unpack at night. I was exhausted and just went to sleep after dinner. I had strange dreams and imagined the drawers in the room being opened and closed. In the morning, I went to unpack but saw that the closet and drawers were already full. It was like teenage boys' clothing, but from a while ago, like maybe 20 years out of date. I figured I could live out of my suitcase in a literal way for one weekend, since it seemed wrong to disturb what was there. Feeling thoroughly creeped out, I went down to breakfast. I tried to bring up the topic of my room gingerly, since I kinda had an idea what was probably going on. My uncle admitted that it had been his son's room, but that he was no longer with us. He said he had vacuumed and dusted it recently when he heard I was coming. He only had one guest room, which he gave to my parents, so I got his son's old room. Okay, it was only for one more night. That day, my parents were sitting around talking about boring things with Uncle William, so I went for a walk around his grounds myself. His backyard was a lawn that led to a small forest with a man-made lake in the center of the mini woods. I thought it was like a fairy world, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move. I decided to rest by the lake or pond, and I kept seeing little things flitting by, but only in my side vision. When I would look to where I saw the object or creature, it wouldn't be visible any longer. That's why I hesitate to say it, but it felt like I was actually seeing fairies, or some kind of tiny people. Some of them seemed to be flying. But I chalked it up to my imagination, since I had been thinking that the clearing in the woods with the waterhole in the center seemed so much like a scene from a fairy tale. I noticed something moving in the water, and it was still there when I focused on it. Bright, shiny, yellow and orange goldfish. I'd never seen such large goldfish. My uncle must have made this pond and seeded the fish in it. He was an interesting, if eccentric, fellow. I went back to the house, and the oldsters were still talking about the most boring things imaginable, so I went up to my room to see if I could get Wi-Fi on my phone and find my friends online. When I got up to the room, though, I found my suitcase open with all my clothes thrown around the room, and a lot of them were torn up. I ran downstairs, furious but also frightened. I asked who had thrown my clothes around and ruined them while I was out for a walk. I was certain it was my uncle, as neither of my parents would have done something like that. They all insisted they had been together the entire time I was out. I looked my mother in the eye and asked her to think hard and be certain. Had anyone maybe gone to the bathroom or something for just a few minutes while I was out? She said no. Uncle William said that since I had brought it up, he suddenly felt the urge to go to the bathroom. As he got up to go, he apologized for what had happened and told me I could wear any of his son's clothes that I would like to. That was a little weird. As soon as he was out of the room, I begged Mom and Dad to please take us home. This guy had ripped up my clothes because for some reason he wanted me to wear his dead son's stuff. There was something wrong with him. Who leaves a room intact after someone dies? I could see doing it for a few months out of grief, but by the looks of that room, his son had been gone at least a decade, maybe much longer. My father rolled his eyes at my being upset and seemed to pass off the responsibility of dealing with me to my mother. She put her arm around me and led me back upstairs to that room. She spoke soothingly as we walked, telling me she was sure it wasn't as bad as I had said. When we got to the room, though, her jaw dropped because it was just as bad as I had told her. My torn clothes were everywhere, even hanging off framed pictures on the walls. My mom actually apologized for accusing me of exaggerating, but now she gave me a strange look. It dawned on me that if she was convinced my uncle had not done this, the only other possible candidate would be me. My mother must have thought I tore up my own clothes. She went down and talked to my father, but they kept moving away as I walked toward them, and I couldn't make out what they were saying. The conversation got a little heated. Then Mom got this defeated look on her face and she came back over to me. It turns out she'd been trying to get my father to go home a night early, but that he felt this would be an insult to our host. I was angry and felt that he cared more about the feelings of a distant relative than the safety of his own son. I refused to wear the dead son's clothing, so Mom got the car keys from Dad and we drove to a mall in Vineland, I think. The entire time, I was saying that the guy would just tear up whatever we bought, but Mom said if I locked my suitcase, then only I would be able to tear the clothes up. I didn't like the accusing look in her eye when she talked about me tearing up my own clothes. So that night, I put the new clothes we bought in my suitcase, locked it, gave the lock to my mother to hide wherever she wanted, and tried to feel comfortable enough to sleep. Again, I dreamed of the drawers in my room opening and closing, but this time, I woke up in the middle of the dream and looked over at the dresser drawers. The top drawer, the socks drawer, it was sliding shut, just like in my dream. I jumped out of my bed and ran over. By the time I got there, the drawer was completely shut. Had that really happened? Was it really a waking dream? Or had I actually seen it? This room was so creepy. I walked over to the guest room where my parents were sleeping. I stood in the doorway listening to them snore. It had been a childish urge to run to my parents when I was scared at night, but I'm not a kid anymore, so I just had to put on my big boy's pants, if they haven't been ripped up yet, and go to sleep in the room that was available to me. I walked down the hall and came to the room, but literally fell backward when I was met in the doorway with a young man standing there. He seemed as surprised to see me as I was to see him. We both screamed, but his was silent, and as he screamed, he kind of blinked out of existence. I was watching from the floor by that point, as I had fallen on my butt. My parents and my uncle all came to see what had happened, and when I told them, I saw a boy in a t-shirt and shorts, and then he was gone. Only my uncle seemed to believe me. He apologized and said he should have been more open about that room. I often saw and felt the presence of his son there. It was the reason he hadn't wanted to make any changes to it. The thing is, he wasn't sure it all hadn't been happening in his imagination, so he thought it would be safe to let me stay there. He assumed he would be the only one his son would appear to, if he wasn't actually imagining it. I assured him he was not imagining it. Uncle William offered to let me sleep in his bed, and he would sleep on the couch, but I wasn't going to be able to sleep anyway. Dad said we could leave after breakfast, so I decided to stay up the rest of the night and sleep in the car on the way back. Everyone was cool with that arrangement, so they went back to bed, and I went down to the kitchen to make some instant coffee and see if any of my friends were online late. Only a couple were, then they went to bed, so I went on YouTube to see what was new. As I was watching videos, stuff started sliding around the kitchen. Like a coffee cup slid down the length of the table. Then this metal tea kettle slid down a shelf until it touched a porcelain teapot, making a delicate clink sound. Each time I would just say, "Okay, that was normal," and go back to watching my video. I did the math on how long it would be till breakfast and wondered if there might be a way to get breakfast to be earlier somehow. I searched online to find when dawn was supposed to be and counted down the minutes. Although this ghost of his son, had ripped up my clothes in the bright daylight, so I don't even know why I cared when the sun was due up. When the time came, I went to the picture windows in Uncle William's dining and living area, and it still looked like night. The colors of the sky maybe had gotten slightly more blue, but I think the forest and the mountains past it were not allowing the sun to really show through in this part of the planet just yet. I could still see stars, so I watched them twinkle and enjoyed the trees blowing back and forth in the night breeze. It felt like everything was sort of coming back to normal. Then, once again, I thought I saw something out of the corner of my eye. I glanced over, assuming I would see nothing when I gazed directly, just as it happened with the fairies in the forest by the pond. But this time, when I looked over to my right, I did see something. It was something large, taller than my father, and it was running toward me, hugging tight to the wall of the house. I didn't know if it was running to get me personally, or if it was running past the house and I had no awareness I was there. I just know it looked evil and demonic, but hairy. It had a dog-like or wolf-like head, so my first impression was, that is a werewolf running at my face. I took a few steps back from the windows and dropped to my knees, not wanting to be seen, if I hadn't been already. The beast ran past the window. It hadn't been after me after all. It was just running past. I saw it in full for maybe a second, maybe not even that long. It was running on its hind legs, but it ran in this sneaky manner, like it knew it was up to something and was about to pull something wrong. It had this face on it that just looked evil. Like if you looked up the word evil, it should have this face there. It was so classically old-fashioned evil, like from a silent movie or something. It had this sort of grin on its face, but I know it was just really a long-snouted wolf type of head, and as it panted, it just looked like it was grinning. Either way, it seemed evil. When I saw it, the ears were tilted all the way back, which probably means something if you know about dogs, but I don't. I did get the impression it had devil or demon legs, not human-like legs. It bent forward as it rushed along, or I should say sneaked along. It looked like a giant wolf, but it also looked like a giant bipedal rat at the same time because of its posture and the way it held its hands. My mind is drawing a complete blank about whether it had a tail or not. I can imagine it either way, so I'm not sure I was even watching anymore by that point. I think I was running back to the kitchen, where I felt safer. There were only poltergeists in the kitchen, much less terrifying than Dogman. So, I was kind of a zombie through breakfast. I did bring up the Dogman, but I think everyone thought I dreamed it. I do dream about it now, ever since then. It comes to me in nightmares, running down the sides of houses silently, then trying to reach in and grab me. It was a living nightmare that I witnessed, and it calls into question all the other phenomena at that house. Just because Uncle William's son used to live in that room didn't mean it was his ghost that tore up my clothes, whatever a ghost really is. All we know is that there is something invisible in that house that can move things around and I guess tear things up. We don't know that it's a ghost, quote unquote, or anything else. We just know the result of its actions, not the nature of who or what it is. Couple that with the presence of this evil-looking demon Dogman thing running around that neighborhood, and I would say something a lot weirder and spookier than a ghost haunting or a cryptid habituation is taking place. I can't explain exactly why I feel this way, and I certainly can't prove my feelings, but I'm nearly certain that the Dogman I saw is somehow, in some way, related to the poltergeist activity. I'm not even sure what I mean by that, but I never saw anything paranormal in my life, and then this explosion in 2 days. Since then, I've only seen strange things the next time we visited my uncle. I slept on the couch downstairs that time and something kept pulling my covers off. I only see things when I'm there, so I don't think it's me. I think it's the location. I don't really want to go back to that place, but maybe if I had a girlfriend or something with me I might. Then I could look at it as an adventure. Right now, going there feels like putting myself in danger. And so, that is my very weird story about the haunted house Dogman habituation. One of the most popular cartoon characters in the world right now is Squirrel Girl. Obviously, she's especially popular among girls. I know this for a fact because I got to listen to a bunch of very excited young women and kids all weekend, bouncing up and down at the chance to meet her creator. This is the second time I've had my table next to his for a comic convention weekend, and it's always a great honor. Now I'd like to share with you my interview with the creator of Squirrel Girl and so much more, Will Murray.
Hey, you see this? You see this character up here? You know who she is, right? Well, you know who created her? Well, Steve Ditko helped create her, but this guy was the writer. This is Will Murray. Where were you in your life when you created Squirrel Girl? You were working for Marvel?
I was working for Marvel. At that time, I was ghostwriting the Destroyer paperback series starring Remo Williams, which was a movie a long time ago. And the comic book rights to Destroyer was sold to Marvel Comics. And I went along for the ride as a scripter, even though I had not really scripted very much comics up to that point. Right. So I was doing The Destroyer, which was a black and white magazine, and my editor asked me if I would write an Iron Man fill-in issue, and I said sure. And I came up with Squirrel Girl as the character because I wanted to contribute something to the Marvel universe. I've been a fan of Marvel since the very early 60s. I bought some of their earliest books when they first came out. And I thought Marvel in the 90s, which this is 89 actually, but Marvel at that point had gotten kind of grim and gritty and dark. And I said, we need some fun back into this universe. I had a girlfriend whose first name was Doreen, who was into animals. She had dogs and cats and geese and ducklings, etc. And she did animal rescues, including squirrels. And one day we were in a church service, And it's winter, she's wearing a heavy jacket. In the middle of service, she unzips her jacket and this little baby squirrel pokes its head out. I had no idea it was there. It was a rescue and she was carrying it around. She brought it to church. And so jokingly, I thought of her as Squirrel Girl.
Yeah.
So when I needed to create a character for Marvel, I wanted to do something very different. So I created this 15-year-old girl who had the powers of a squirrel and could communicate with squirrels. And she wanted, and because she was young, she wanted to be a superhero, but she didn't know how to go about it, and she didn't have a lot of confidence in working alone. She had a lot of confidence in herself, but she was 15. So she hooked up with Iron Man and tried to get him to take her on as a sidekick. And Iron Man is saying, I don't think this is a good idea. You're very young. And along comes Dr. Doom, which Squirrel Girl had just encountered and kind of gave a hard time to. And Dr. Doom captures them both, and they're in desperate trouble. And Squirrel Girl rescues them by calling upon her woodland squirrels, who come and overwhelm the Doom ship and rip Dr. Doom's iron armor apart. Actually, it's not really iron, it's probably titanium or something.
Right.
And she saves the day. Dr. Doom is handed his most ignominious defeat possible. And Squirrel Girl says, hey, I can do this. And Iron Man is saying, you're too young. And get back to me when you're older, maybe I can get you into the Avengers. And that was going to be the start of what I wanted to do with the character. She would hop around the Marvel Universe trying to make a connection.
Right.
And everybody would say, you're too young, you're too inexperienced, and she would always save the day. And no, I can do this.
Yeah.
And when they published the book, they published it in Marvel Superheroes, which is a dumping ground for inventory stories, because my editor didn't need the inventory story while he was editor. A new editor came in, so they put it in the Marvel Superheroes. And the Marvel editors at that time said, this is a cute character, we don't think she fits into the Marvel universe. And so they buried her. And I kept saying, this character has potential. She could be in Saturday morning cartoons, which they had then and they don't really have now. She could be in toys. She appeals to a different demographic, and she has a certain personality that's unique. And they're saying, no, not dark, not gritty, this and that. And so they buried her. And then another writing and artist team revived her as a joke character, but she kind of caught on, and then they realized maybe she's not that big a joke, and she started to snowball, and then they gave her their own book. In the meantime, I had tried to pitch revivals of her, but they just weren't going for it. But when they did, she caught on. The time was right.
Right, yeah, you were just ahead of your time with her.
I was ahead of my time.
Yeah. So when they use her in media, like TV or whatever, do you get a part of that or created?
Marvel has a program where if you created a character for them that's original with you, they will work with you to get a contract where you get a percentage of licensing, and that's a contract.
Cool.
So I do get some checks from time to time from Marvel for this character, and that's great because she is snowballing.
Yeah.
She's on it. She's in animated cartoons now in Marvel Rising. She's a major player.
Right.
They shot a live-action pilot called New Warriors that's allegedly going to be shown in the Disney streaming channel when that starts later this year.
Good luck.
And the actress who plays Squirrel Girl in the animated show is also cast as the live-action.
Oh, really?
Melania Vantrub.
Oh, okay.
She's Lily on the AT&T and commercials. So they've already got their Squirrel Girl in place. And before she was cast, a whole bunch of actresses wanted to play her because they could see the appeal of the character. It's a unique appeal.
Yeah, and girls really love her. They identify with her.
She's a role model, not only as a superheroine, but body image role model. Because the current incarnation, she's just an ordinary-looking girl of a certain type. Whereas originally she was 15, that isn't really a body type. Yeah. Particularly, that's just a young girl developing. And I deliberately made her, very young, so she had an innocent quality, and she wouldn't be that interested in boys necessarily, and so she could be just a girl.
Right.
As opposed to some of the other Marvel characters who are young, but who are kind of hypersexualized, which I didn't see as a direction for this character.
Right.
Even though they experimented with that.
Oh, did they? I missed that part.
There was a version of Squirrel Girl that was very well endowed and attractive, and she was in the Avengers for a while as Luke Cage's nanny.
Oh, I
And
missed
they
that.
played with that. They even hinted she and Wolverine had a thing at one time, and Wolverine was kind of like afraid of her, or afraid of her squirrels, because the thing about Squirrel Girl is she can communicate with squirrels and they obey her,
Right. Like
which
Aquaman.
isn't the same necessarily as Ant-Man.
Yeah.
Because Ant-Man can only control the squirrels that are immediately around her. Squirrel Girl can summon any squirrel from any quadrant of the universe.
Wow.
She controls the biggest army in the universe.
So she's got the
there's gotta be squirrels
intergalactic
on other
squirrel.
planets.
Yeah.
They
I
may
didn't
not
know
look
there
like
were
our
any.
squirrels, but she's an army of squirrels is a powerful thing.
Yeah, army of any kind of rodent. So, but these days you're doing these
I
old
licensed
school-
Doc Savage from Condé Nast, which is my favorite pulp hero. And I've done, I think, 22 Doc Savages in the last few years, as well as a Pat Savage spin-off. Pat is Doc Savage's cousin.
Oh, she's cute.
She's cute. I licensed Tarzan for Edgar Rice Burroughs Incorporated, King Kong from the estate of Marion C. Cooper, who created King Kong. I've had Doc Savage meet Kong. I've had Tarzan meet Kong. I'd like to have Doc Savage meet Tarzan. I don't know if we can pull that one off. I've had Doc Savage meet the Shadow in 2 stories.
That was my next question.
Yeah, because Condé Nast owns the Shadow as well as Doc Savage. And I recently licensed the Spider, which was the inspiration for Stan Lee's Spider-Man. And the Spider comes with 2 other heroes, Operator 5 and G8, who were part of his little universe back in the 1930s. So,
Oh, I thought this was the Shadow, but this is the Spider here. Okay.
So I'm becoming the king of crossovers
Yeah, really.
by licensing these properties and getting permission to have them meet.
How big a deal is it? I don't want to get too much into your business, but how big a deal is it to license something like this? Like, what is the process without getting into anything too
Well,
personal?
I had done Doc Savage for Bantam Books back in the 90s, and the Doc Savage movie was being developed with Shane Black as the producer-director and Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, as Doc Savage. And it was important to get the character back into the mainstream. There have been comics on and off, but there hadn't been novels in a long time. So I'd been pitching them to revive Doc in novel form, and we finally succeeded once they'd worked out their deal with Sony on the Doc Savage rights.
Okay.
And so now I'm doing it with Altus Press, a local publisher. And once I started doing Doc, which is a 1930s and 40s character, the Tarzan people started to take notice, and
They
he's
contacted
reviving
you?
a character from our era who's a pulp character. And, and the weirdest thing happened. We were doing the 80th anniversary of Doc Savage, and my cover artist is tied in with the Marion C. Cooper estate, and he said to me one day, I can get you the rights to King Kong. I said, you're kidding me. Now, King Kong climbed the Empire State Building in 1933, which is the year Doc Savage magazine started, and Doc Savage magazine was headquartered in the Empire State Building. So right away we had a connection that people had been already thinking, what would have happened if King Kong and Doc Savage met? Well, I didn't have them meet in New York in 1933. I went back to an earlier time where they met before King Kong came to New York.
Oh, and I guess we have to get the book to find out where. But
I can tell you that my story is predicated on the 1933 and the Empire State Building connection, and the fact that it's early Depression and audiences are being entertained by really outrageous concepts. Doc Savage is a Superman. He's an outrageous concept. King Kong is ape-like being. He's an outrageous concept. For King Kong Tarzan, I look
That's a
back
great idea.
at the original movie, and they gassed King Kong on Skull Island, and they presumably take him back by ship. They never show that voyage. And I said, well, if they went west, they'd have to go through the Panama Canal. If they went east, they'd have to go through the Suez Canal. Could they get this guy through customs? Big Monkey? I don't think so. So they would have to go
that's
to
probably
New York.
why they don't show it.
Yeah, you would have to circumvent Africa to avoid going through any canals. And I said, what if they have to take on provisions in Africa? What if King Kong gets loose and they need Tarzan's help to capture him? That's the premise of King Kong versus Tarzan.
So I was going to ask.
Story.
I was going to ask you why you chose King Kong, but it was chosen for you. It was fate.
Chosen for me. Yeah.
That's amazing.
It was just a property I would never have thought I'd get the rights to, but my cover artist was doing King Kong projects for the estate. We had a way in.
The cover artist is great. What's his or
Joe
her?
DeVito.
Joe. Oh,
He's
okay.
a long-term, award-winning pulp and paperback cover artist. Did a lot of science fiction, horror, adventure. He was my original artist on the Doc Savage books and Phantom books. And when I got these rights, I reached out to him and said, "Oh, you want to get back into the Doc Savage business?"
Yeah.
And he was just delighted. You know.
So also, can you tell us about what these are?
Several years ago, when I started my Doc Savage books, an old-time radio company got a hold of me and said we'd like to package old pulp magazines as audiobooks. They started by licensing my Doc Savages.
Oh, cool.
And they spread out to those, and for a while this was the Will Murray Pulp Classic series. And we did that for several years, and then we parted ways. They've still done some of this stuff. They've been doing audiobooks of all my docs, and they're doing okay.
Cool.
And so things are just snowballing off of my original Let's Just Revive Doc Savage idea.
That's great. Well, continued good luck.
And with the spider, we got this guy across from us, Larry Elick, to do a spider.
Right. Oh, this is Larry. Okay.
You know,
cool. This is Larry
And
Elick.
if it's successful, maybe we'll do one based on the spider serials from the 1930s and 40s, where he had a kind of a different look, a Spider-Man.
So how do people find you to buy stuff like this or to check out your
Well,
work?
our books are on Amazon, but
Okay.
we also have a website, adventuresinbronze.com.
There we go.
adventuresinbronze.com. We sell ebooks, physical books, hardcovers and softcovers, trade paperbacks. And so no matter your budget, you can find something you want from us.
Cool. Well, thanks so much.
I'm glad to talk to you.
And thanks, Squirrel Girl.
Squirrel Girl is the greatest girl who never was.
Come back next time when I promise we'll have a new episode of Brian's Lichen Troubles and a new paranormal and cryptid-related serial as well. It's sort of like a modern Dark Shadows, but Dogman and Sasquatch oriented. You'll see what I mean next time if you come back for the next episode of Scary Good. Bye for now.
Come back for more scary stories.